Aloha guys, Dr. Tom Walker is back. We're going to have another fascinating discussion today. Today we're going to talk about a very brief introduction to microbiology. Microbiology. And because microbiology plays a pretty big role in disease, we're going to start off talking about disease. Disease is failure of the body to function normally. Okay. Pathogens. This is a really important word. Disease-producing microorganisms. Now we have to say disease-producing, guys, because there are a lot of microorganisms that do not cause disease. In fact, we have more bacteria inside of our bodies. Now hold on to your seats for a minute. When I first read this a few years ago, I flat didn't believe it, but apparently it's true. We have more bacteria in our bodies than we do cells in our body, and we got trillions of those. So bacteria, for example, is absolutely essential for life. We're covered with it inside and out. It's supposed to be there. It protects us, does a lot of different things. However, some things are pathogenic and can cause disease. And until, 100 years ago, say, infectious diseases were the leading cause of death in the United States. By the mid-50s, heart disease and strokes, cardiovascular stuff, cancers, and that sort of thing had risen to the forefront, largely lifestyle related. Okay, so a pathogen is a disease-producing microorganism. Infection, invasion of the body by a pathogen. Infection, invasion of the body by a pathogen. It can be localized, restricted to a small area, or it can be systemic throughout the body. Systemic infections can be very serious and life-threatening, as you might imagine. Okay, types of pathogens. Bacteria is a big one. Bacteria is everywhere in the world. It's absolutely vital for life as we know it, for us anyway. And it's a common cause of various pathogenic diseases. Viruses are big time in the news right now because at the time that I'm recording this, we're in the middle of the pandemic, the COVID-19. The interesting thing, guys, about viruses is a couple of things. One is antibiotics only work against bacteria and not viruses. Now, do they give them for viral problems? Oh, yes, they do. And that's one of the big problems we have. Now, part of that's patient demand, too. I want an antibiotic. What I was going to say, according to most biologists, viruses are not even living creatures. They're not living entities. Why? Because they don't reproduce in the normal method within biological systems. And the way they do it is they invade a cell, inject their RNA, commandeer and take over the control of the cell's nucleus and reprogram it to start building little tiny small viruses like that one. And then when the cell fills up, boom, it ruptures, and there's a host of bunch of new viruses ready to do the same thing. So viruses are technically not living things, but they seem to act like it. Fungi, things like athlete's foot, toenail fungus, those sorts of things. They tend to get down, guys, or bread mold, or mushrooms, are examples of fungi. Fungus is plural. The key thing to remember about fungi is that it gets settled into the deeper layers of the skin, and it's really hard to get rid of. Like people that have toenail fungus and stuff. Sometimes they have to go on a special regime of medicine. And it takes like months and months to get rid of it. Protozoa are single-celled organisms. Like here's an amoeba. And for example, if you're out hiking somewhere and you drink some water out of a creek, I've done it a million times, both as a kid and in the Army, and never got sick. But you can. You can get real sick. You can get amoebic dysentery, which will clean you out. So there are some protozoans that can cause some pretty serious infections. Again, with our standard water treatment and that sort of thing, we don't have a problem with that. But many years ago, oh yeah, dysentery, that sort of thing was rampant. Or it's really sad, but like in prisoner of war camps, that kind of thing where there's poor sanitation, dysentery will run through there and kill bunches of people. Worms. Yes, there are people and dogs and animals. So there are people that still get worm infections. Mainly, I think it's more in children, but kids eat dirt and stuff, and they can catch worms. Arthropods are jointed insects like ticks. Now here's one here: rickettsia, chlamydia. Ticks can make you really, really sick as that tick fever. Now this is showing the different types of bacteria. We're going to talk about these, but bacteria are often classified by their shapes. If they're in two little round bunches, they're called Diplococcus. If they're in chains, they're Streptococcus, like strep throat. And if they're in bunches of groups like grapes, is what I'm trying to say, they're Staphylococcus, like in staph infections. Yeah, that's where those names come from. If they're rod-shaped, they're bacilli, curved rods, and so on. Any questions? Well, seeing as how no one's here but me, there can't be. Okay, bacteria. Many animals, including humans, have a membrane around the cell. Bacteria have a cell wall. Bacteria are composed of a single cell. They have a cell wall, and most antibiotics, particularly the penicillin group and all, work by preventing the bacterium from producing a cell wall, and that kills the bacteria. One of the most problematic things about bacteria is they can form spores. And that's why, guys, medical instruments have to be so highly, highly sanitized and disinfected. Because bacteria can form these, they can go into a storage mode. And even boiling water will not kill a spore. It has to be put in an environment where there's high pressure, steam, and heat. Spores can even have been shown to survive in outer space for a period of time, which just boggles my mind that it could withstand the vacuum and the high and low temperatures and all that, and the various radiations out in space. But they most certainly can. So medical and dental instruments have to be processed in a device called an autoclave, and it will destroy spores. And what happens if you miss some of these? Like, let's say, even if you dunk the instruments in boiling water and there were some spores present, when you use those and you open somebody up or you put it in them, those spores are going to come off and they're going to boing, spring back, and the person could have possibly a life-threatening infection. Okay, we mentioned the groups a moment ago. Cocci are round, bacillus are rod-shaped. Different ways. There are many, many different kinds of microorganisms and many, many different kinds of bacteria. Viruses, fungi, protozoa, single-celled organisms. Now, of course, in this presentation, we're treating viruses as though they're living things. But again, biologically, they're not considered to be living. Viruses consist of DNA or RNA with a protein shell, or it can have a fatty shell around it. I don't know a lot about it, but the COVID virus has a fatty material around it, and that's why washing your hands with soap is effective. That will wash it away or remove its coat and kill it. Viruses reproduce only within a host. It commandeers the nucleus, takes it over, reprograms it, makes it produce more viruses, like itself. Fungi cause mycotic infections, which is what a fungal infection is caused. Protozoa are animal-like microbes. Arthropods and worms are multicellular organisms. Worms can be round or flat. Some of the best-known worms, guys, flat ones, are tapeworms. And they, if you ingest them and eat them, they'll latch onto your intestines and grow. Some of them grow tremendously long. I mean, like 10 feet or more. And they'll latch on, and then they'll just hang out there in the current as the food material goes by and gobble it up. There's various medicines you can take that'll worm you. Roundworms, pinworms, and stuff can be a real problem. Again, in areas where there's poor sanitation and or children, transmission by fecal-oral route. That means it comes out in the feces, and somewhere or another you get it back, you eat it back in. It's either on vegetables or in dirt or something. Worms are not rarely fatal or anything like that, but they can be a real problem. It's rough. Okay, arthropods, animals with jointed legs, ectoparasites and vectors. Things like ticks can carry Rocky Mountain spotted fever. I've got a friend that had it and said it was serious business. He was really, really sick for quite a while. Laboratory identification of pathogens. The Gram stain, guys, is real important. There are many kinds of bacteria. The first major method of classifying bacteria is the Gram stain. If it'll take the Gram stain, let me back up and say a lot of things, guys, have to be stained to be able to see them under a microscope. They're transparent and you barely can see them, so you have to stain them and prep them. If they'll take the Gram stain, which is a purple or a blue color, they're Gram positive. If they won't take it, they're Gram negative. So this Gram positive and Gram negative is the first big classification of bacteria. You heard them say something like, it was a Gram negative Diplococcus that was caused, and that kind of thing. They also have an acid-fast stain, retains red stain, and I don't recall, I should remember, but I don't. I had microbiology in some detail, but of course, it was a long time ago. The Gram stain is much more common, and you see it a lot more. So be sure to know what Gram positive and negative means. Okay, if we want to figure out what kind of a bacterium might be making a person sick, we take a culture, or we take a sample of it. The doctor will take a swab and seal it up and send it to the pathologist. Pathology is the study of disease. Pathologists are the medical specialists that identify diseases and tumors and that kind of thing. Okay, and then they'll culture it in the laboratory, which means they'll put it in a petri dish with a nutritive medium of some sort, and they'll grow it and see what it is. That's what culturing is. Pathogen sample collected and grown in a medium. Why? Well, if you know what it is, guys, you can be more specific with the type of treatment. You don't have to just bombard it with antibiotics, because that's caused all kinds of problems. It's caused us to have a lot of bugs that we can't get rid of anymore. Spread of infection. Well, a big one is the respiratory tract. Another big one is the gastrointestinal tract, when we eat and drink stuff. The genitourinary tract, the case of STDs or cystitis, bladder infection, I'm sorry. The eyes can easily transmit disease, believe it or not. The skin can, if it's not intact. If you have sores, open wounds, that kind of thing. And parental route means getting stuck with something. Okay. The respiratory tract is a big one, guys. Respiratory problems are the number one reason that people seek medical care. How do we spread it? How does it get out of our body? Well, basically in the same ways. Coughing and sneezing, like with the COVID virus. That's why masks are so important. It just boggles the mind that there's these good old boys out there that still think that masks don't work, when they do some, they have to. Okay, gastrointestinal tract again, through less likely through vomiting, but perhaps in stool samples. Genitourinary tract, in the case of STDs and that sort of thing, you can spread it. The eyes. The skin, again, the skin under normal conditions does a great job of defending against it, but if it's broken or something, or the breast. Now, I know what you're thinking. Now, Dr. Tom, how can the breast spread? Have you ever heard of breast milk? It's possible to spread problems through in a nursing mother. Modes of transmission, person to person. One person gets another one sick. From the environment to a person, or from tiny animals to persons. Maybe not so tiny. Okay, this is all we're going to talk about. Let me just say here, this is part of a wash those myths from this doctor. In the 19th century, when they discovered how important it was to wash hands, to this day, guys, hand washing is the single most important way to prevent the spread of disease. So it's particularly important in medicine. The doctors fought it tooth and nail. They would go and deliver a baby and go to the next woman, deliver a baby without gloves and without washing their hands. And they wonder why the infant mortality rate is so high. It's outrageous. Of course, now we know that, but they fought it. They fought it big time. They fought anesthesia, too. Okay, we're going to finish it up for today. Our next topic is going to be on tissues and membranes, and I don't mean Scotty or Kleenex tissues. So, see you there. Be there, be square. Dr. Tom signing off.